Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Morality Side podcast. This is Michael Della Jacopo. Okay, a couple of quick announcements first. So, after some rather positive feedback over the last week since the release of my first episode of this podcast, I've decided to go ahead and continue making episodes, at least in the near future. I had a lot of fun chatting to Rob Farquharson last week about platforming, artificial intelligence, and wild animal suffering. And I've already been coming up with ideas for future topics and people to interview for the podcast. So looking forward to that. So today I don't have a new interview for you. What I'm intending to do is to alternate between interviews and just more general discussion with just myself. I may change this up in the future, so let me know what you think about this episode compared to the last one. But at least just for this one, and probably for a few more in the future, I'm going to be expanding on some of the content I already have on my blog, michaeldella.com. So if you enjoy what I'm talking about today, then definitely go and check that out. I've got two topics, two blog posts I'm going to be talking about today, and they are United Airlines and Dark Mofo, and why spending money on shark culling is a terrible idea. And I'll link to those. In the description. So the first one on United Airlines and Dark Mofo. What I'm trying to do here is tie together two things that might sound rather different on the outset, but I think have a rather common underlying theme. And I'll talk more about this once I've discussed the two pieces. But really, the common theme is it's something I talk about a lot, and that's that I think there are a lot of particularly kind of global news events that occur where people get really upset and outraged by something without really thinking about it too much. And these things sort of self-propagate. So, for example, if something comes out and, there's always two sides to a story. Of course, there's only, to take one of my favorite quotes from Cloud Atlas, the movie, the truth is singular, all versions are mistruths, but at the same time, everyone has their own version of a story. It just tends to be the case that the version that gets out first, the version that kind of picks up attention first, is going to be the one that people believe generally. So if something gets out through media or social media, then people tend to pick that up. They'll get upset and maybe share it without thinking, without doing too much background research or thinking too much about the implications. And really, it kind of just gets out of hand, and the other side is just left stuck. And what sometimes happens, not always, there are some legitimate cases for examples of where people are outraged about something, for sure. But definitely in some cases, people will share these kind of things and talk about it, take a position without really understanding all the nuance behind it. So that's the common theme I want to talk about here. So the first example is United Airlines. So you will have almost certainly heard about this. This happened a few weeks ago. United Airlines, there was a United Airlines flight on the tarmac, on the ground, waiting to take off in USA. So the story goes that they needed to bump 4 paying customers from the flight in order to accommodate 4 United staff who were needed at another location. Passengers were asked to volunteer their seat in exchange for compensation to accommodate the staff. From what I understand, eventually United had to randomly select some passengers in order to get all 4 people off. And 3 of the passengers left without incident at some point, whether before or after this random selection process, I'm actually not sure. But in any case, one passenger was randomly asked to leave, and they would not leave their seat. So eventually the police were called to remove him. So this passenger was saying that they didn't want to leave. They said that he was a doctor and that he had to see patients the next day. So the police were called to remove him, and the passenger ended up being injured and removed from the plane. I'm not sure exactly what the extent of his injuries were, but from what I see from videos, he was at least seemed to be bleeding from his face. So, of course, this event was very unfortunate and bad for the passenger in question. There's no doubt about that. But I think there are some important things to keep in mind before you get too upset, although it's probably too late for that. So these points are taken from a podcast by Vox called The Weeds, which is actually a really good podcast that I recommend, that I've been listening to lately. And it had a good discussion on some of the finer details of this event. So some salient points to remember. First, the physical mistreatment of the customer was not by United, it was by the police. And so United presumably called the police to remove this passenger, but the actual physical handling of the passenger, and I would argue the blame for that, is solely in the hands of the police. Unless someone can make the case that United somehow gave them some information or told them something that it led them to then injure the passenger or remove the passenger in the way that they did. But somehow a lot of the anger around the situation is really directed solely at United. I have not seen anyone come out against the police in this specific case, but the injury was done by the police. There's no doubt about that. The video clearly shows that they were removed by the police. The second point is, whilst this specific event got a lot of attention and I guess was a little bit unusual, things like this happening, passengers having to be bumped from their flight, it's really not that unusual. So the business model of an airline, this is something I didn't know until very recently, and I'm assuming a lot of people don't really know this, but the business model of an airline is to book more customers than there are seats, with the assumption that some customers will not turn up and that most of the time they will have less customers turning up than there are seats, and they'll get away fine. Occasionally this doesn't work, so they have to compensate people. However, despite these occurrences, airlines still run this business model, despite this happening from time to time, because airlines are a super competitive business. And this is just one of the things they have to do in order to remain competitive with their competitors. So whilst this event was a little bit different, this is the case of for staff having to come in and take the seats. Just the notion of being bumped from a flight is not that unusual. So the third point is, the story goes, at least according to the Weeds, that due to bad weather and some other extenuating circumstances, the United staff who were taking the customers' seats, they had to get to their destination or an entire other flight would be cancelled. So I think it was a combination of bad weather. So obviously, as I said, they have to run with kind of slim margins in order to remain competitive, and that means that they can't have a lot of backup staff waiting around. So they had to relocate 4 staff for this flight, otherwise they would not be able to take off. So if this is true, say this passenger just sat in his seat, would not leave, was just refusing to leave until the staff, one of the staff, I guess, didn't take their seat and was left behind. Presumably what that means is that an entire other flight on the other end wouldn't be able to take off. Maybe that's a little bit dramatic. Maybe one staff wouldn't have made that much of a difference. But let's suppose that. Would we really say that? So people have been talking about fairness. It's unfair that this passenger who paid for their seat was removed from the plane. Would we really say that this one passenger should have kept their seat at the expense of an entire flight worth of passengers who have all paid for their tickets as well, mind you? Unless I'm being dramatic here and that wouldn't have actually happened, I think the case is kind of clear actually here. I mean, this passenger definitely paid for their ticket, and yes, it's unfair. Life is pretty unfair at times, especially when you're running a business with a slim margin. Then this stuff happens. And you could say, well, a fair retort might be, well, that's the fault of United. It's part and parcel of them running a business model like this. And I guess that's a fair point. But at the same time, you are also agreeing to be part of the system. So maybe you didn't realize that this is how airlines run. But the fact of the matter is, that is how they run. And you are essentially being subsidized whenever you fly. You're being subsidized by the other people who don't turn up to the flight. And you're getting cheaper seats. So you are a part of this, and I do admit this is somewhat of a different example. But you are part of a system, and you are benefiting from a system that is running on slim margins and giving you low cost flights. Actually, I guess a better analogy would be if, in order to make sure this happens less, all airlines just had more backup staff. This would of course cost your ticket. This would make your ticket more expensive. But this sort of thing would happen less. And maybe people will be okay with that. But I mean, I don't think anyone's really advocating for that specifically. They're just kind of getting upset at United without really looking at the system that kind of drives this sort of occurrence to happen. Is there more to the story? Well, almost definitely. I'm sure there's more layers to this than I have covered or been able to discover. But I do think United is copping a little bit too much blame for this, to say the least. The physical handling was the fault of the police, not of United. So direct your negative attention there, if you will. But for the situation occurring in the first place, you'd have to really kind of get upset at the entire business model and argue for it to change in order for you to really be upset about the specific case, I would argue. But interestingly, and I mean, they probably felt pressure to do this, so they didn't have much of a choice, but United has since said that they will no longer, that their new policy is to no longer bump paying passengers from a flight in order to accommodate staff. So that, I guess, means that the situation won't happen again, in theory. Which is interesting, because if that was their policy a few weeks ago, an entire flight would have been cancelled. And I'm not sure, I think when that happens, if it happens, maybe opinions will switch. But in any case, we'll wait and see. The second story involves a 3-hour performance with a slaughtered bull, which on the outset appears very reminiscent of a ritual. So this is called, it's basically an art installation called Dark Mofo. It's by an artist by the name of Herman Nietzsche. I'm almost certainly pronouncing that wrong. But essentially what this is, it's an art installation that's coming to the Mona Art Gallery, which is in Tasmania, Australia. It's going to involve a bull, the carcass of a bull being cut up and rather gruesomely, I guess, blood poured over people's bodies and so forth. So the RSPCA, the Royal Society for the Protection of Cruelty to Animals, they've come out and said that the art is disrespectful to the body of the animal. But what was interesting is they were very careful to say that they don't object to the slaughter of the animal itself. They were saying the animal would be slaughtered under Australian welfare regulations, so they didn't object to that. What they're objecting to is what happens to the animal's body after it dies and can no longer feel pain and suffering. So as a prelude to discussing this, I'd like to say that I really like to steelman stuff. Steelmanning is, say, when if you're in a debate situation or there's two sides to an argument, say you have an adversary, perhaps. Steelmanning would be to take your opponent's case and to make it stronger. And there's a few reasons why you would do this. So one might be if what you really value is if what you're trying to do in an argument is to seek the truth. You owe it to yourself, to your opponent, and to everyone who really try and find the best argument possible. So if you see someone making an argument that you think could be made stronger, even if you disagree with that position, you should try to make it stronger. This helps with mitigating your own biases. It helps you ensure that your position is truly the correct one. And I think it's just generally a good habit to have. So I like to steelman stuff. Having said that, so while I am in some way defending the art installation here, I still don't really know if it's a good thing. I'm just trying to make the point that it's almost certainly not as easy an answer as you think. So this whole thing has two groups of people very upset: vegan animal advocates and non-vegan animal advocates, and I've put them in separate groups because there are some interesting points I'd like to make about each group. So the vegan animal advocates generally object to the use of any animals for entertainment, including food and other forms of entertainment exploitation. And so this definitely falls into that category. The non-vegan animal advocates object to this because it's, I guess, because it's disrespectful or because it's gruesome would be their argument. But really, I think more likely the argument is just because it's unusual and so it seems wrong to them. And the reason I say that is because, of course, if you know anything about factory farming or the way animal farming tends to take place, or even just slaughterhouses for non-factory farmed animals, they're really quite horrific. You know, if what you are concerned with is kind of the well-being and the suffering of animals, if this bothers you, then I think you should be bothered by, you should be bothered by you should be bothered by animal farming and slaughter, and you should I guess try and not partake in that, or try and reduce that. And a way you can do that obviously is by adopting a vegan diet, for example. I guess their reasons are perhaps a bit different because of what they were concerned about is the treatment of the animal. Then it's quite hypocritical, but to be fair, I guess what they're concerned about more so is the fact that it's disrespectful to the animal, or that it's gruesome, or something like that. But I find that kind of interesting. Even if it's disrespectful, if that is the reason to be against this art installation, one could very easily argue that what happens to animals in slaughterhouses and factory farms is also disrespectful. I won't go into any details here. There's plenty of stuff you can look at if you disagree with me. But if you think this treatment of the dead animal is disrespectful, you should see the way that live animals are treated, especially at the moment of their death. So when I first saw this news piece, I saw an article about it in my Facebook newsfeed and kind of just scrolled right past. I didn't really pay too much attention to it beyond the title. I sort of caught the gist and was mildly against it. But then my mum, who is an artist, shared a blog post, which I'll link somewhere, by David Walsh, who is the founder and owner of the Mona Art Gallery. It was a long but enjoyable read, so I definitely recommend it. And I've highlighted some of my favorite paragraphs, which I'll read out in a moment, and then I'll say a few things. So I think these paragraphs, these quotes, kind of really sum up the key points that he's making, in my opinion. So David Walsh says, "All that verbiage, and I still don't know whether Nietzsche's performance is justified. I can argue that it does good by creating awareness of moral hypocrisy, highlighting the slaughter of millions of beasts a year for unneeded food, but it is hard to find a way that avoids it being categorized as a direct action, and humans generally think doing good by doing bad is wrong." And then another quote, so these quotes are not necessarily in order. Yvette Watt, Tasmanian local and, I later found out, a noted vegan crusader, expressed her opinion on Facebook that it was not good art. For my purposes, it is good art. I believe that it has already spiked a conversation, thank you Yvette, about the appropriateness of slaughter, and Dark Mofo hasn't even happened yet. This isn't what the artist intends, but Mona has a history of repurposing art to serve its own psychological or political purpose. And the last quote is, "If you don't think the side effect argument has merits, consider this. We have a work at Mona by Janice Kunelis," see this blog post, and you can find that in the original article. "When whim pervades, we hang chunks of meat from hooks. Nobody cares. The only reason I can think of as to say why that is okay, but Nietzsche's meat isn't, is that Kunelis's meat is killed for food and repurposed as a side effect, whereas Nietzsche's is killed for performance and later eaten. The side effect is the only legitimate purpose. I hate that Nietzsche insists on eating the meat. I want clarity of intent. I want the audience to ponder why meat for food is okay. At least people aren't protesting at Mona's barbecue, but meat for ritual or entertainment isn't." End quote. Yeah, I think there is some good points in there. It seems hypocritical to unless you focus on this event for strategic reasons, which is fine. But if not, it seems hypocritical to be against this and not be against, say, the other meat art installations at Mona or their barbecues. But to be fair, this event in particular is getting a lot of attention, so people just might not have really been aware of that. And strategically, this could just be a good opportunity for gathering attention around it. Basically, Walsh is making a utilitarian steelman case for the art installation, and I think he does a pretty good job. What he's essentially saying is this art will hopefully, potentially, be able to bring people's hypocrisy about being against this, but being pro-consumption of animals. It will hopefully kind of bring that hypocrisy to light in people's minds, and maybe cause them to reconsider their thoughts about consuming animal products because of the way that animals are treated in farming in general. I have to say I'm a little skeptical as to how many animal product consumers would look at this art and be turned off animal exploitation and cruelty in general. I don't know how strong an effect that is. I'm leaning towards not that strong. And there is an argument to be made for sure that this might desensitize people to violence. I don't know how strong that is, but actually I do think that's less strong or less likely than the first case, than people recognizing the hypocrisy. So what I might say to vegan animal advocates, which is a cohort I consider myself to be a part of, I am myself a vegan, how much of this protest is symbolic and how much is actually practical? So if the show is cancelled, let's say, and that's all that we achieve, we might save one or maybe more bulls in the future if we stop his future similar art installations. But you could do that much good by donating around $1 to the Humane League. The Humane League being a highly effective animal charity based out of the US. You can see Animal Charity Evaluator's review of them to see just how much good you can do for very little amount of money by donating it to them. So it might be a symbolic gesture in support of animals, but I don't place too much value in symbolism. In fact, I place no value in symbolism unless it actually has tangible effects on present or future well-being and suffering. Maybe it does, but I actually don't really see that case being argued. I think this really is just being done for symbolism or out of principle, but I don't really feel like, and maybe I'm being a little bit unfair if people are making this case, and of course I should try and stillman it. But I just don't see people really making that case that they're protesting this because they think it's going to result in any real tangible long-term change for animals. Tying both these events back together now, everyone gets upset at stuff without really thinking about the finer details. I will make a blog post sometimes without doing as much background reading as I should, and from time to time it does come back and bite me in the ass. The best thing you can do is to be as careful as possible and make a point of admitting and correcting your mistakes. And that second one is really important, admitting and correcting your mistakes, because at the end of the day, you can't just research as much as you want into everything. At some point you have to take a position on something, and you don't have the time. You don't have the time to do a literature review on every single topic that you want to take a position on. So you have to just make your best judgment in some cases, and you can do this using heuristics, kind of like rules of thumb, about based on your experience of the world, whether things are good or bad. So you're going to get it wrong sometimes, no matter how careful you are. The best thing you can do is just make a real conscious effort of admitting and correcting your mistakes when you do make them. Okay, so on to the second one: why spending money on shark culling is a terrible idea. So I've been planning to write this for a while, and a rather tragic recent event triggered me into writing it. Actually going ahead and writing it. So a 17-year-old surfer, young girl who I actually can't find her name in any of this, but in any case, a 17-year-old surfer in Western Australia has been killed by a shark. I believe she was attacked by the shark and then rushed to hospital, where she later died. This is, of course, a tragedy, and definitely do not want to downplay that. This is just such a tragic loss of such a young girl, and my thoughts are with her friends and family. However, in response, the Australian federal government has said that they're now open to a shark cull in order to protect people. And a shark cull, if you're not from Australia, this is discussed semi-often, and I believe Australia has the second most shark deaths in the world, right after the US. But shark culling or other measures of protecting people from sharks does come up in the media from time to time. It does come and make discussion, and people propose. A few years ago, the Western Australian government specifically was proposing a shark cull, and now it seems that the federal government is proposing it. The Minister for Energy and the Environment, Josh Frydenberg, has come out and saying that he's considering this, which I find interesting because so 72 people have died to shark attacks in Australia from 1958 to 2014 over the last 56 years. It doesn't seem that high compared to the level of attention that it's getting. First, I need to acknowledge that I think this is bad because I intrinsically value animal suffering, and I feel like this might impact animal suffering in a negative way. I've already been asked after writing this blog post, but you believe in wild animal suffering, and you believe some animals have net negative lives, so how does this play into that? And to be honest, I'm not sure. I don't really know how this plays into that, so there's a lot of considerations that I don't think I can make really a good judgment on this. I mean, sharks, they're a part of our ecosystem in some way, which I don't intrinsically value, but upsetting the ecosystem might have negative effects. Sharks eat a lot of fish, so maybe it's a good thing then if you remove the sharks, but then at the same time, that it might have unforeseen consequences on the fish population. But fish might have negative lives, and so maybe removing fish is a good thing. I mean, there's just so much there that I just can't really make a reasonable judgment about that. If any of this sounds super strange and weird and surprising, then I recommend you go and check out the last podcast that we did towards the end, where we talked about wild animal suffering, and I really laid out that case for just how animals can suffer in the wild and why that's bad. So yeah, go check that out if any of that was just totally left field for you. Look, what I'm doing here is just really trying to focus on just humans. But so let's say we look at this from a government policy perspective. So even if we just look at humans, and not only that, let's say we just look at humans specifically in Australia, which to be fair, the Australian government would tend to do. They're elected by the Australian people. They have to protect the interests of Australians. So pretty much most of what they do is focusing on probably Australian humans, apart from say their foreign policy, their foreign aid budget, and a few other things. But let's say we just look at humans. What I'm going to do here is make do a really simplified analysis to try and work out just how much, just how much this would cost per life saved. if we were to go and do a shark cull. So what I'll do is I'll make some simplified assumptions to make the case for culling seem more attractive than I think it is. So to show like a best case scenario, and then I'll hopefully show that it still does not make economic sense. So as I said, from 1958 to 2014, a period of 56 years, 72 people died to shark attacks in Australia. There were 536 attacks total, 72 resulting in a fatality. But let's suppose that for a one-time investment, which is of course unrealistic, it would be a recurring thing if you wanted to protect people for 56 years. But let's suppose a one-time investment of $10 million, I think is unrealistically low, which I haven't completely just pulled out of the air. So that's based on the fact that a few years ago in Western Australia proposed their trial for shark culling. They said it would cost about $1 million. I'm just assuming that a complete program would cost at least 10 times that. We can prevent all shark attacks in Australian waters for the next 56 years. So like I think all of these points are just unrealistic. Let's grant that. Let's suppose that that's true. Let's suppose we save every single person who would have died. So let's say maybe 72 more people would have died in the next 56 years without a shark cull of some kind. That would come out to so for $10 million investment, that would come out to a cost of $138,888 Australian per life saved. Even with these extremely optimistic assumptions, that is an exceedingly poor return on investment. So, I mean, if you say you donate to the Against Malaria Foundation, you know that you can save a human life for approximately $6,000 by preventing cases of malaria. But as I said, let's be fair to the government. Let's say that they just want to care about people in Australia, which they do generally. There are still more effective ways of reducing death and improving people's lives. For example, the median cost per quality adjusted life year, QALY, gained for Australians by interventions for specific diseases such as diabetes. So the median cost per quality adjusted life year is $3,700 Australian. So you can, just looking at that, like $138,000 per life saved in the absolute unrealistic best case. Like compare that to $3,700 that's per quality adjusted life year. It just doesn't seem to add up. Like it just seems like such an ineffective way of helping people. So the question is like, do we care about all suffering, or do we care about just suffering specifically experienced by humans and specifically caused by sharks? That would be silly, of course, but government policy doesn't always seem to make that much sense. I guess the steelman of this is that maybe they're just trying to win publicity points. So maybe they aren't. I'm going to grant them they aren't totally ignorant of cost-benefit analyses. Maybe sharks are just a topical issue today, and the government wants people to like them. So that's what they're coming out in considering this. But let's not pretend that the policy would make any rational sense to someone who's interested in improving the world, even if you only care about animals of your own species, and even if you only care about humans that happen to live within an arbitrarily defined political boundary. Even if you only care about those people, I think this still makes no sense. I strongly, strongly urge the Australian federal government to please reconsider any thoughts of a shark cull. Please do an economic analysis, cost-benefit analysis, and consider other things you can do to help Australians, let alone helping other people and animals, and to please focus on helping sentient beings in a significantly more effective manner. Okay, so that concludes my, expansion of those two blog posts. If you want to see them, as I said, you can go to my website, and I'll have direct links to those pages, which will have all of the references for the stuff that I've talked about in those pages. I'm really interested to hear what you think of today's format. So, of course, no interview today, unlike last week. What I'll try to do is kind of switch between interview and something more like this. This won't always be just a rehash or an expansion of existing blog posts. I'll try and do some new content as well. It's kind of just to get the ball rolling. But yeah, I'm really, really interested to hear what you think. In terms of production quality, I'm working on an intro theme, working on a new logo. So stay tuned for all of that. If you have any ideas or suggestions, I'd love to hear them. But until next time. So of course, if you want to follow us, you can find us on Facebook at Morality is Hard. Just search for that, or you can get to us via my website, michaeldello.com. And please, or even on YouTube, which you can also get to through my website. And please like us, share us with your friends, give us any feedback. positive or negative, or anything you want discussed in the program, or even if it's just a small point that you'd like mentioned. Very happy to include that on the next episode. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.